7 o'clock. Today is Monday, February 12th, 2024. I'd like to call this meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order. Start first with a discussion item here, Public Arts Policy Status Update and Discussion. Madam Mayor, turning to you for our regular update, see if there's any news or any updates.
Just a brief update. I am currently working with our outside counsel. I believe that I shared previously that I had, again, had received a draft from the panel that there, in talking with the outside counsel, was, in his opinion, a section really critical to defining the parameters around what art can and cannot go up in public spaces. So right now, the outside counsel and I are going back through, really he is, all of the minutes from the meetings that we had, because there was a lot of discussion around that. It just didn't make it into the policy, so he's going back through what the panel did talk about to see if we can just craft something based on what they had already discussed and analyzed, and then complete that policy, which I will then share with council, and we can have a more public discussion about that.
All right, thank you. Anything, any sense of timeline on that, Madam Mayor?
I don't, and I'm sorry. Being sick for a week put me a little bit behind where I wanted to be. So.
Anything from council on this item? All right. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Next up, items from the Department of Economic Development. Director Hammonds. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Thank you. Correct? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Excuse me. The first item is a request to authorize the mayor to enter into an office and industrial incentive agreement with Nuvik USA for the expansion of its crocodile cloth company here in the community. This application and request meets the guidelines of the 2002 O&I policy, or actually guidelines, which were updated in 2011. We have had a number of them over the years, 7 or 8 probably in the past, for companies who expand here. The last one being July 2023 for Ortho 1. That was a 5-year agreement, which ironically doesn't start until year 11 after they are here for 10 years. So another one recently was the Columbus Aesthetics Plastic Surgery in September of 2022. So it's something that has been used, I would say probably sparingly over the last 10 or 12 years. But Nuvik USA Incorporated is a parent company to Crocodile Cloth, one of the fastest growing disposable cleaning cloth companies in the United States. They have been located at 930 Claycraft Road since 2019 with 25 employees and an annual payroll over $2 million. The company has been considering growth and has been considering options, some of which include moving out of Gahanna. However, the company's now expressed interest in staying in Gahanna and moving to the new 291,000 square foot building at 1800 Deffenbaugh Court that was just recently completed. The company would vacate approximately 60,000 square feet at its current location at Claycraft and immediately fill approximately 96,000 square feet in the Deffenbaugh building, with the opportunity to grow to more than 130,000 square feet in the future. To encourage the retention and expansion of the company, we are recommending the office and industrial incentive be utilized. The company would grow to 70 employees within 5 years and grow their payroll from a little over $2 million to $6.8 million in that time frame. The non-issue 12 payroll tax increase over that 5-year period is calculated at $201,000 increase to the city. 5-year 50% O&I incentive then would be half of that, or $100,500. The beauty of the O&I is that they don't get the incentive unless they create the new tax dollars. And hopefully they'll do better than they anticipate, but they do have some strong growth planned. Furthermore, the company, as it moves to the new building, would, as I said, vacate approximately 60,000 square feet, which would be backfilled by Benchmark Company, which is currently in the building. So they could also grow their company from about 65 employees to 145 in that 5-year period. Benchmarks, payroll would grow from $6 million in 2023 to $15 million at the end of that 5-year period. We met with the O&I Advisory Committee on February 2nd to review the incentive and got good support. And therefore, the Department of Economic Development respectfully requests council to issue an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an office and industrial agreement with Crocodile Cloth for its relocation to 1800 Deffenbaugh and the adding of those jobs. Because the company must commit to a lease immediately, and they are expecting new machinery to be delivered, we are requesting that the waiver for the second reading be done and that it would be approved on the first reading. We are not going to ask for an emergency clause, however, for this ordinance. So I just want to talk a little bit more about the company. It's an international company with offices in Australia, UK, Canada, United States. They have a comprehensive EOE policy that I have to share with you if you'd like to see that. Excuse me. They have a 401k with a 4% match by the company. They provide health care to their employees at 70% payment by the company, and also have an HSA where they contribute $2,000 to each employee. Acquiring and maintaining quality workforce is very important to them. We did a fairly extensive background check on the company. There are no outstanding issues. Also, we checked with our finance department, and they are paying their taxes, and there are no outstanding issues there either. So we have Bryce Kennemer here, who is general manager. He'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have regarding the project and the growth trajectory that they're on.
Thank you, Director, and good evening, Mr. Kennemer. Happy to turn things over to my colleagues for council for questions, but if you have anything you want to lead with, you're more than welcome.
I don't have anything in particular I'd like to lead with. Thank you. I don't have anything in particular I'd like to lead with. I would say that we've greatly appreciated the working in the city of Gahanna and have found it to be a killer place to work and grow staff. We, as Shannon has alluded to, we greatly value the staff that we have on board, and we are committed to growing our staff. I think that the employer plays a large role in the development of staff and of individuals that are under the responsibility of the employer. We do so with a number of ways, but just would echo what Mr. Shannon has said. We have really appreciated working here with the city and look forward to any questions or any clarity I can provide.
Thank you very much. Anything from my colleagues? Mr. Schnetzer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kennemer, I think on the lengthy list of benefits that Director Hammonds had listed, can you just confirm you guys also, I believe, offer a company-wide profit-sharing plan? Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So your employees are experiencing or get to participate in some of that rapid growth you guys are projecting as well?
Yes, that's correct, Mr.
Perfect.
Spencer.
Thank you. Director Hammonds, you had talked about payroll and some of the growth, and you had mentioned the O&I committee. So on February 2nd, I got a sneak peek at some of that growth. But your prepared statements today talked a lot about payroll. Can you talk a little bit, just for the record, about some of the corporate profits with both of the companies there? Generically would be fine. You don't have to get down to the last cent or anything like that.
I think I had mentioned that the payroll tax was over $30,000 this year to the city. Adding the corporate tax into that is actually more than doubling that. So that kind of speaks to where they are right now. If you look at the growth over the next 5 years, which I have that somewhere in my stack of information. Basically, you would see that the payroll for each of those companies is basically tripling from, oh, thank you. So if you look at the increase, as I said, it's 201,000, so the O&I would be 100,000. The payroll tax, that is the non-issue 12, actually would go up to $417,000 a year just for, that's the end of the 5-year period. Actually, the total for the 5-year period is 417. If you look at Benchmark, their payroll tax, non-issue 1, approaches for the 5-year period a total of more than $1 million. So that's a really good story because we're not incentivizing the Benchmark project, only the crocodile cloth. So we get a 2-for-1 in this instance. If it was just crocodile, it'd be a great deal, but Benchmark growing is even extra special, so.
Yeah, apologies, just to maybe put a finer point on that. I think when we spoke a week or two ago, there was some discussion about the corporate profits, which are, my understanding is separate from
Yes,
the O&I. So that, and that's not reflected here, but just, again, in broadly speaking terms, that's just kind of adds to the economic value to the city or to the community.
Yeah, I didn't bring the corporate profit numbers total.
Director, if I could pause you there for just a moment,
Yeah.
and I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Schnetzer. My understanding is the live stream is down?
Yeah, it is. We're still recording, and we're trying to get that up as soon as possible.
Any objections I can do? All right, sorry, Director.
Okay, that's okay. But if you kind of hold the same ratios of payroll tax and corporate tax, I mean, it's basically doubling each time, so it's a great story to tell.
Perfect, thank you, Director.
And I don't know if Bryce can speak very quickly to what's causing the growth, specific contracts that you may have secured and things of that nature. Is that something you can respond to?
Yes, be glad to. Thank you, Director Hammonds. Some of the growth that we've seen is due to growth in the cleaning sector overall. We're a cleaning product. We have a product which is selling through retailers. So what we found is that retailers who take on the product see growth with cleaning category in their companies, and they've wanted to grow it within other parts of the retailers. So a lot of what we have seen growth with is on our retailer partners, on retail side, the likes of Home Depot. There's a lot of wholesalers as well. For example, Ferguson, you'd be familiar with here, like Ferguson Plumbing. So we have a lot of incentive inside the company to grow the company. That is the direction that we are a very growth-minded company. And a lot of our conversations on a day-to-day business are how we're going to grow it. So we track our activities. We have a value creation plan that we're responsible for to the board. I don't know all what would be helpful to add, but that's the whole bent of the company is growing the company. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Renner?
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Kinnemer, thank you so much for growing your business here in Gahanna, and I think it's actually a tribute. We always want our businesses to grow, and then understand that there's a profit-sharing device to your business as well. I think that's also very admirable, and so I thank you. My question is really not germane to what's before us, but I'm very curious as to if you could speak to any kind of environmental program that your company has taken a look at with your process or the life impact of your product, beyond once it leaves your docks. Do you do anything on that nature?
that's good. Thank you, Mr. Renner. Environmental programs have been a very big part of our planning in the last 24 months. It's very important for us that we respect the environment. We have what we call our 3P promise, which is people, product, and planet. And as part of the planet promise, we are committed to providing offerings which are environmentally friendly, such as biodegradable cleaning products, such as products which are, like we have a citrus-based cleaner, for example. We have a vegetable, not very well known, but a vegetable-based cleaner. We consider the carbon footprint of where we're sourcing products from and are consistently trying to bring onshoring products from raw materials being manufactured in other parts of the world to being manufactured in the United States of America. So in short, I would say that we are very environmentally conscious. The consumers that we sell to are a group of environmentally conscious consumers as well, and they hold us to a high standard. So we respect that, and in order to continue growing our brand as a respected brand in the cleaning industry, we hold that high in our internal priorities.
I was smiling a little bit when you said the people, planet, and the profit. That's called the 3 Ps, the triple bottom line in sustainability circles. So that's very admirable too. I was wondering if there was time that I can actually get on your calendar and come visit your operations and talk to you a little bit more in depth about this.
Yes, certainly. I'd appreciate that opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have to say that I've used their product. I'm a very messy painter, and I can use one of their sheets as opposed to using 10 of somebody else's that are very weak and feeble when it comes to cleaning up. So,
And Director, what do you do with that product when you're done?
well, I put it in a recycled bin, and so far the folks have not rejected it. So I'm assuming it's being recycled. So.
It's not. But thank you.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Director. And thank you, Mr. Kennemer. Director Hamans, I thought your written report was excellent. It did a good job at explaining the incentive, and I think overall the O&I incentive is a great example of a win-win type of incentive that we can offer to businesses to attract and retain job growth here in Gahanna. Mr. Kennemer, I had a couple of follow-up questions. I know that that Director Hamans referenced a little bit to your equal employment opportunity, employment status, and your non-discrimination statement from your company. Could you speak a little bit more to how you attract and retain talent beyond the incentive package, and then how you, whether you have a DE&I or any kind of diversity initiatives at the company?
Yes, thank you. President Bowers, it's very helpful. So it is, once the first job that we have is to share with prospective employees the opportunity and the responsibility that's before them when they join the company. We spend quite some time working through the hiring process, sharing with them our core values, what we expect from them, and really what we're looking for this individual is a match between our core values and their personal core values. And there's a lot that goes into it. How we attract good employees beyond I think your initial question was how we attract employees beyond the compensation. And what I would go back to in that is the core values of our company are very strong, and they're self-evident to those that come into the office and spend time speaking to our staff. What we find is that there's people regardless of their cultural background, there's people with a set of core values that aligns with each other's. So regardless of anything else, we have people who are committed to getting things done, people who are committed to delivering a good quality product, and people that are committed to taking care of each other and our customers. So how we retain good staff, and I would continue the beyond the compensation program, is that they are brought on board and treated as, we believe that every person is seeking to achieve something, that every person achieves fulfillment in life by striving for something. And when they come on board with our company, we are striving for high growth, and we are striving to deliver the best cleaning product on the market. And when they come together and whatever their part might be, whether they're packing boxes in the back, whether they're helping us manufacture the products in our manufacturing line, whether they're answering phones, whether they're an accountant, they all see that we're working together to deliver a great product to the end user. As to regards to the DEI program, I would say that that is on our outlook for the next 24 months, but we do not have a published DEI program right now, being candid with you. So it is on our outlook, and we are seeking to develop that, but we do not have it published.
Thank you.
Mrs. McGregor?
I would just like to thank you for expanding your business here. We have, Kennemers have been good partners with the city over many projects over the years, and we appreciate that. It's always been a pleasure to work with your family. So thank you for that.
Ms. Jones?
Yeah. So, given the staffing shortage across all industries, would you say, and it's a two-part question, would you consider yourselves fully staffed now? And sort of what is the makeup of that staff in terms of like frontline, warehouse, leadership, and how does that sort of break down, grow as you grow? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does
Okay.
make sense. So we have warehouse and supply chain staff. We have manufacturing staff. We have staff that are in the office, all full-time, and then we have staff that are based in the office but travel. So what I would say is that our staff that are in the warehouse makes up a fifth of our staff. We have office staff in the production line that makes up right now we have 25 staff. That's what you said to begin with, right? 25 staff in 25 staff total, 5 staff in the warehouse. We have approximately 10 staff in the production line. We have approximately 10 staff that are, 8 staff that are in the office, and then 2 staff that are in the office but travel out.
Okay. And all of those are benefits eligible, and will that stay as you grow to the 70-ish employees?
Yes, that is
Okay.
correct.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kennemer and Director. I'll just say, I'm always happy to see our local businesses grow and succeed and thrive, and this is certainly no exception. Also happy that that large spec building will be getting a 10. I thought they were holding out for one to fill the whole building, so, but I'm glad to see that Crocodile Cloth will be moving in. There is, so removing the request for emergency, they are still requesting, or administration still requesting waiver of second reading. So on for the 19th, and does that work? Consent agenda on that, or regular?
That's fine.
Yep, that's fine.
All right, on for consent on the 19th. Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next item, please, Director.
Thank you. I'm up again. Action item number 2, a resolution approving the determination of compliance of a petition for organization of a new community authority and setting a time and place of hearing of the petition. You may recall, some of you may recall, some of you who are newer may not, but Gahanna City Council approved a development agreement with CP Crescent LLC on November 11th, 2022, that outlined a community reinvestment area, CRA, tax increment financing district, development standards, and a new community authority program, commonly referred to as the NCA. The legislation defined the elements related to commercial and multifamily development with a defined area of the Crescent at Central Park, which is approximately 41 acres, and adjacent to the interstate at 270 and Hamilton Road interchange. In accordance with that ordinance that was previously passed, the developer has submitted a petition for organization of a new community authority. The purpose of the NCA is to encourage the orderly development of a well-planned and diversified, economically sound community, referred to as the new community, which can include facilities for the conducting of industrial, commercial, residential, cultural, and educational, and recreational uses. Basically, this NCA which was described previously in the previous ordinance, is for just the properties in that 41 acres. It will only impact the properties therein and will not impact any existing school taxes or city taxes that are collected currently. And the NCA and the board that's formed after this is approved could increase the millage upon themselves to help pay for the SIB loan that was also created recently. I'm going to ask Council Sean McCarter to describe this process a little bit better. He has a lot more experience with this than I do. So Sean, would you like to make some comments regarding this?
Certainly. This is a petition to you, and that's what the statute provides. So you sit more like a judicial body, and tonight you determine whether the petition is compliant with the statute. That is just that it contains the various pieces of information that the statute requires. In my opinion, it is compliant. Once if you decide that the petition is compliant, the next step is to set a hearing within 30 to 45 days.
Thank you.
Within 30 to 45 days to hear whether the petition should be approved for meeting the standards of promoting health, safety, and the new community. And you need to set that hearing tonight so that the date and time can be published. It looked like your meeting for the 18th of March would work out for the timing and so forth required. What the NCA does is it allows the NCA board to add additional millage. In this case, they're providing for up to 5 mills on the property. So it doesn't take away anybody's taxes. It adds to the taxes. It creates a fee collected the same as real estate taxes and then paid back to the NCA to be used for infrastructure. In this case, it was particularly targeted as a way to repay the SIB loan payments and any payments on the SIB that the developer made, developers behind the city on that, as far as order of payments. As Director Hammonds indicated, this was provided for in your development agreement with this developer. If there's any specific questions.
Thank you, Mr. McCarter. Thank you, Director. Anything from my colleagues? Yes, Mrs. McGregor.
Is the NCA for a determined amount of time, or does it go on forever?
There will be, I believe, a set period of the NCA. I don't know that, I can speak to that because the body hasn't been created yet to set that, but there is a time. Oh. Sorry. I would imagine that it's probably going to be in effect for a 30-year period. Does that sound legitimate?
Yeah, as I recall, the period was for a minimum period to cover the SIB. Remember, we were here before on the SIB loan, and that what it was set up to do was to recover the approved infrastructure expenses. So that's the time period it would run for.
So I'm not sure that time length has been set yet.
Well, no, because in part, it would be based on performance because of how it performs, at the rate it collects, and then it's the obligations it needs to satisfy. Relative to the SIB loan, it has to accumulate sufficient funds to provide a reserve in case for some reason it would diminish, and then once the reserve, that's payment protection for the city, is established, then the developer is entitled to some repayments and repayments associated with any monies the developer paid on the SIB, because the developer's got the front-end obligation to cover those payments until such time, if I'm remembering right, as the NCA has for 2 periods had enough money and accumulated the set reserve. And then the developer isn't being looked to anymore to cover those payments, but the developer behind the city has the right to receive it. So the time period of it will be dependent on the performance of this. One thing about an NCA that I like is once the improvements and so forth are made, the value is the value is usually steady. You know, unlike employment that can go up and down a lot, your property value tends to trend up over time and be fairly steady. Therefore, your millage, which is applied against that, will have a steady return of money. So that's one nice thing about an NCA. I know this is a new program for Gahanna, but this is being used by several communities, and New Albany has used it to great effect. Did I answer your question?
Maybe.
Maybe.
That's why we asked the attorney to be
I
here.
guess what I mean is, will it end at some time?
Yes.
There you
Yes,
go.
it
Okay.
will end, sorry. Yes, it will
That'll
end.
do. Maybe that's a better way to
I
ask
don't
that.
have the specific date because
Okay.
it's based on performance and paying off the various debts that it would be obligated to
Okay.
pay against.
And I want to point out the fact that the millage that it referred to is extra millage that the developer imposes upon their own projects. It has no effect on anybody else outside of that. So it is self-imposed, they are agreeing to it, they promote it that way, and whatever millage that is, it's 5 mils, 6 mils, whatever that is, then it's diverted into that payment. So it's something that has no effect on anybody else but them.
Well, and New Albany used this with their school system when they first started developing up there. They created a new community authority for all the new development to help fund the schools when they, and I don't know if it's still in effect or not, but.
Communities have used it for fire departments, fire buildings, other things, recreation facilities, but it's just on a defined area.
Right. You said at the board, who's on the board? And who determines who's on the board, who sets the board?
Okay. The board is set by the council and the developer, and you'll select 3 citizens, they'll select 3 developers, and you'll select 1 local government representative. And we'll, after this is in place, we'll have to do a further resolution with regard to the future reappointments. This board, though, is not overly active. You know, there's not a whole lot to do. It'll adopt a few things to begin with, including the millage, and then it will start just performing, and who gets paid will be controlled by contract. So it's not a lot of considerations and so forth going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Somewhat relatedly on that, can you speak to the bond requirements for the board members? Looks like there was a necessary $10,000 bond for the board members.
Yeah, I mean, tell you the truth, I don't have that number in hand, but any type of administrative costs and so forth would come out of the NCA, and if necessary, be fronted by the developer on the front end, reimbursable.
Thank you. Ms. Bowers?
Yeah.
I did just want to note, I'm sorry, real quick, that we are back up and the live stream is,
Yes.
and we'll work to get the full, complete video uploaded to YouTube after the fact. So I appreciate everyone's efforts on that, and sorry for interrupting, Ms. Bowers.
Oh, no, thank you. I had two questions. While I remember the second one, the first question was whether, and I apologize if this is obvious, but is this a public body? Is it a body of the cities, or is it a quasi-governmental body?
It's a public body,
Okay.
but it's not the cities. You have the right to appoint to it. It's a standalone, separate entity that, you know, can. It's an overlay type of, you know, body. Drastically different, but like how a school district's an overlay. You know, they provide their service and they overlay the city. This entity for the land it has is an overlay on top of the city and has its own unique authority to then administer the program, which essentially is adopt the millage and adopt the program for paying out the millage, which has been prescribed, you know, here, and to then administer the eligible expenses, et cetera, for, you know, for payment.
So that helps me think of the second question, which is is there who's auditing or monitoring the repayment of the SIBs to know when the NCA should dissolve? And relatedly, is this overseen by like the auditor, the way the Turk board is, sort of reports to the auditor, or does it report to council? What's that sort of
The
structure?
The board would have its responsibility for determining when it should come to an end on the millage. The audit function is like all the other governmentals that fall under the auditor of state. So the auditor of state administers programs on those, and the audit function there, though, should be pretty straightforward. You know, the millage will be collected the same as taxes, so there'd be a twice a year distribution out of the county, and then it would, you know, simply be paid out accordingly for the obligations, the principal obligation being the SIB loan payments.
But it's not included on the Turk? But this wouldn't go to the Turk even though it has an impact on property taxes?
I don't believe so. I don't believe it's part of the function.
I don't
of the
know,
Turk.
I'm genuinely asking, but
I have never seen, I've only been on the periphery of several in some communities, and I don't recall, I never had to report because I wasn't intimately involved, but I don't remember them ever being included on the Turk report.
Aren't
Texas
those?
Center Review Council.
Yeah, but that's usually employment.
right,
This isn't employment-based.
okay.
This is, nor is there a target to achieve, because nobody's losing anything here. You know, usually when we have these programs, somebody's giving up taxes, and so to incentivize it, you say, well, okay, I need you to meet a goal, because at the end, I'm hoping you're at the goal when the full taxes come back on, you know, and employment being one, or a tax abatement, a CRA, something like that. So you say, hey, for that CRA, you've got to meet this employment goal. This program doesn't function with an employment goal. If it doesn't work, it's detrimental to the developer, because, you know, they're not getting these infrastructure costs repaid, but it's not detrimental to somebody else. So it's self-incentivizing, if you will.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay.
Any follow-ups, Ms. Bennett?
I can do it offline.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any of my colleagues? Okay, so just as a matter of process, I understand we would like to set a hearing for the 18th and a vote on the petition itself for the 18th, and that would meet the timelines that you specified, correct, Mr. McCarter? Or, I'm sorry, for March 18th, I'm sorry.
Okay. We need the hearing set for the 18th, but tonight we need also a vote that the petition is compliant. That doesn't mean that it has to be passed on the 18th. That just means that it set forth things like the name of the NCA, the address of the NCA, the property description, provided the zoning, a proposed development program, and sets forth a basis for selecting board members that's compliant, managers' capabilities, and a commitment that they will comply with environmental laws and regulations. It's a rather formulaic type of thing that's mainly established through attachments. You know, here's the property, here's the zoning code, here's the development plan, et cetera. My review of this petition is that they did in fact meet those requirements. So you have a complete petition before you. So now you can consider it is the idea.
Thank you for that. So we're meeting as committee tonight. Would a vote on a motion or on, I guess would it be a direct vote on the resolution next week on the 19th hit those timelines?
I think that would be appropriate. One more week would be at a regular meeting. Certainly,
regular
the
meeting.
resolution could be passed at that time.
Hang on, I'm trying to do the date calculation in my head for the hearing.
So we had, I think, if we go back to the date of, the petition filing date is the date the petition is officially presented to the clerk, which was the date of the memo, which would have been last week.
But it was the date of the vote to the date of the hearing is what I was trying to calculate. And that's that 30 to 45 day window
And it can't be before the 30-day mark?
before the 30-day mark. And this is unique. This is not according to your normal process. This is like a court filing. We are now before you. I don't mean to say it this way, but time to make a decision is kind of how it is. It's not in your normal course of when you get things and so forth. You were petitioned, therefore you have been you have an obligation to take action.
Well, I'm by no means a math expert, simple country lawyer here. But if today's the 12th. So if we were to vote the 19th, that
28 days would be March 18th.
28 days, that's only 28 days.
And then,
29 days.
yeah, so that's too soon, correct?
Yeah.
And then the next regular council meeting would be April 1st, which would be too
far.
late.
So could we set a special meeting for March 25th on the committee, would be our committee of the
Committee.
whole night, to take the
Okay.
vote on the underlying petition, as I understand it? So for that special meeting, what are we actually voting on? A motion to move forward with the petition, or?
No, you're presented with the question of, is the petition as put forth conducive to the public health, safety, convenience, and welfare? And is it intended to result in the development of a new community, which Shannon touched on was, residential or industrial and so forth? And if so, then if you find that, then you declare that the new community authority is to be organized.
Can we do a special meeting like this week to get it in time to approve it instead of waiting till next Monday? Would that get it?
Could I interject something here? And I'm not a legal expert, and that's why we asked this gentleman to be here. But setting the time and place for conducting the hearing is the crux of the 30 to 45-day window.
Yeah.
So setting that date to March 18th is within that window. The resolution to accept the petition is completely separate from the date setting, is the way I look at this, correct? Okay. So the fact that we have asked for a resolution to accept the petition, which really isn't common, because when these are brought to councils, basically we ask, would you please, and some of it's not even done by resolution in other councils. They say, we have accepted it, we've seen it, we agree that the petition is filed, and then we set the date for March 18th, which is within that 30 to 41-day window. So that's really kind of the window that we're trying to operate on, which is separate from the board accepting the petition. You're just recognized that the petition has been filed with the city. So I don't think that there is a problem with, at the regular council meeting, setting the meeting and accepting the petition by resolution, as long as it's March 18th, which is in that 30 to 41 day, or 30 to 45 day, which is still 41 days. March 18th would still be 41 days from the filing of last week. So does that make sense? Does that make sense,
That
Sean?
30 to 41 days runs from the date the petition is filed with the clerk.
Which was basically when this was submitted to the clerk.
Okay.
Let me,
Is that all right?
he's correct. I was saying this slightly wrong. I double-checked looking at my paperwork. It is from the petition filing date. So as long as you get the hearing set by then, the one thing is, you know, the hearing is to be set upon determination that the sufficient petition has been filed, the hearing shall be set, and it shall be done within 30 to 45 days. The only other thing going on is the hearing notice period, which is 3 weeks. So if it's going to occur, you know, next week, then you just need to get going on that hearing notice period, or public hearing notice, which was provided to the city attorney.
So resolution on consent.
Thank you, Director, for clarifying.
I don't always play attorney, but
City Attorney?
Yeah, I think they clarified it. So it's from the date of the filing of the petition, so we are fine to pass a resolution on the 19th of February and then have the final hearing on March 18th. That gives us 21 days, in excess of 21 days to run the public notice.
Avoiding Mrs. McGregor's special meeting. That all sounds good without recapping everything.
Sorry,
Yes,
I have
Ms.
one more question on this. How long after the hearing on March 18th do we have to appoint the committee members?
Statute says 10 days.
You knew. You knew. Oh, no.
Again, it's one of these statutes that, you know, if you blow it, what's anybody going to do about it? But that's what it says.
Can we publish, if we were to solicit applicants to serve on the NCA, can we publish that prior to the hearing?
I don't see why not. You know, in consideration of a proposed NCA.
Yes.
So,
So I just want to make sure that the 19th, that they can accept the petition and then set the date, and we're all kosher on both parts of those, correct?
yeah, and it's a determination that the petition's sufficient.
Yeah, and as I said, and when this was first brought to us, we were told it really doesn't even need a resolution because it's basically they're just agreeing in public meeting that the petition has been filed correctly. But I think it's always good to have a public record of a resolution that stamps it and solidifies that. So that's why we had recommended going with the resolution route, so.
So Clerk Van Meter. Oops, sorry.
I think we're open, aren't we? Yeah. Darn it.
Go ahead, Director.
So I guess my only then recommendation would be for this to be placed on the consent agenda for next week then, I guess, as a resolution, if I could recommend that.
Consent okay for that, folks? Mr. Van Meter, are you clear on what needs to happen?
Yes,
All right.
yes.
Thank you. Anything else before we leave this topic? Okay. Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Mr. McCarter.
Appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have items from the city attorney. Madam City Attorney?
Thank you. Before the committee is the request for an adoption of the ordinance 69-2023, which is the traffic code update. I have received the Muni Code proposed revisions and corrections to our ordinances to make it up to date and in compliance with state statute. I've also done some further revision and review of that to eliminate some redundancy, as well as a couple of substantive changes. One of the substantive changes was an update to the bicycle ordinances. This was a pretty substantive change here, eliminating several provisions that relate to bicycle permitting and licensing. And so we are, with the consultation with the police department, shifting to a voluntary free bicycle registration program. So a lot of the requirements for that have been eliminated from the ordinance, from the codified ordinances. It also includes a provision allowing for bicycles to ride across crosswalks instead of having to stop and then walk your bicycle across crosswalks, which is consistent with other ordinances, including that of autonomous vehicles on sidewalks and crosswalks. And lastly, in that section, we also did a update to the motorized bicycle or moped sections, which I think in error before had included electric bicycles, but are actually specifically by definition not included in that chapter. So I just cleaned up some of the language there and improved some internal consistency to references to our set code versus the ORC. The second substantive change that was made was the texting while driving statute. This statute mirrors the prohibitions that are in the state code. However, the penalties are enhanced, and I am recommending that there be enhanced penalties to this section to mirror the seriousness of the offense. I think that this is specifically authorized in the state statute permitting municipalities to increase and enhance provisions for the penalty section. And I think that the enhancement here, the first level is the same as the state statute, and then it enhances from there for multiple offenders, as well as having a provision in there for causing death and serious injury. And so for that, basically sums up my revisions here. I do believe that we have a speaker, Ms. Sharon Montgomery, who would like to address council on the issue of the texting while driving ordinance.
Thank you, Madam City Attorney. Good evening, Ms. Montgomery. Welcome back to committee.
I don't even know how to thank you enough for all this, giving all this, I'm sorry. It's been a busy day and I'm tired. For giving this matter the time and the effort that you're giving it. I've been trying for way too many years to get people to just understand this problem, let alone trying to fix it. Imagine this scenario. You're hit by a car, and when the squad arrives, the police tell the EMTs that the offender was sober. So the EMTs give you little or no treatment, they just drive you to the hospital. At the hospital, they tell the doctors the offender was sober. So the doctors give you little or no treatment. Would we as a society stand for this? Of course not. We'd be outraged if the healthcare system treated crash victims this way. But we allow the legal system to treat crash victims this way. I can give you 4 reasons why you should put stronger penalties into our distracted driving law. I can offer you the only argument against it that I've ever heard, and it's flawed. Reason one is justice. State law declares that crime penalties must be proportionate to the seriousness of the offense and must not demean the impact on the victim. Sounds good, huh? But there's a catch. If the traffic offense isn't charged as a felony, it's not a crime. Yes, you heard me right. It's not automatically a crime to seriously injure or kill with a car. So this proportionate, not demeaning stuff doesn't apply. In my case, where there was one death and 2 serious injuries, the prosecutor not only chose to leave the charge as assured clear distance, he denied my specific request to change the charge to at least vehicular manslaughter. I had no recourse. I have learned in my 23 years of advocacy that my case is not unusual. The penalty for ACDA is a fine equal to that of littering. Where is the justice in that? The $75 check the offender mailed in was absolutely demeaning to my family and me. Psychologists tell us that acknowledging that a wrong was done is crucial to healing from a trauma. The state has yet to acknowledge that the wrong was done to my family. Instead, it has said that my husband's life was worth no more than a candy wrapper. Reason two is consistency. It is a felony for drunk or drug drivers to cause serious injury or death. Felonies have harsh penalties. It is not a felony for other drivers to cause serious injury or death unless the prosecutor chooses to use the felony charge of aggravated vehicular assault or aggravated vehicular homicide. Vehicular manslaughter isn't even a felony. Reason three is precedence. There is a precedent for requiring stronger penalties. When Governor DeWine decided to take on the distracted driving problem, he did several things. He had ODOT form a distracted driving task force to study the problem and make recommendations. I was a member, so I can assure you we were diligent and thorough, and our membership included a broad range of experience and expertise. Our report was made public in April of 2019. I have given the chief and others copies of that report previously. One of our recommendations was generally to increase the, quote, increase the fines, points, and penalties for distracted driving, end quote. He also created the Ohio Traffic Safety Council to identify areas for improvement with emphasis on action items. One of the first subcommittees formed was the Distracted Driving Subcommittee. I'm also a member of that, although it is important for you to know that in my advocacy here, I am speaking for myself, not on behalf of that council or subcommittee. And with the governor's input, Senate Bill 285, the unsuccessful precedent of the new state distracted driving law, was introduced in February of 2020. It created the offense of vehicular assault by distracted driving and vehicular homicide by distracted driving to address the usual serious injury or death on a par with DUI penalties. Taking harm seriously, it also created a new offense to address a new lower level of harm. It created vehicular harm by distracted driving. These offenses had escalating penalties. Despite 25 proponent testimonies and only the public defender as an opponent, Senate leadership did not support 285 and it died in committee. The next attempt was to put its provisions into the House's transportation budget bill the next year, but they were then removed with the thought that distracted driving should be dealt with as a standalone bill. My request to have a say in what was asked for in that next bill, our current law, were ignored, and these extra penalties for harm were taken out. Not put in, I'm sorry. There is also a precedent for a city to take traffic safety matters into its own hands when the state refuses to do so. In 1999, after the state had failed to pass 2 distracted driving bills, Brooklyn, Ohio, made its own law. By 2009, when the state had spent 10 more years failing to act on 16 more distracted driving bills, many cities spent the next 3 years passing their own laws. In 2012, the General Assembly finally enacted House Bill 99, which our state representative Nancy Garland introduced at my request. The Senate severely weakened it at the last minute by making it a secondary offense. When Governor Kasich signed it, he said he would have signed it even if it had been stronger. At least it gave us this provision by allowing stronger penalties. Reason 4 is safety. It is believed that the stronger the penalty, the stronger its deterrent factor. Obviously, the ultimate goal is to prevent crashes, especially those that cause serious injury or death. If stronger penalties are enacted, publicized, and routinely implemented, they could help reduce the number of distracted crashes. The argument against this? Opponents of stronger penalties for causing serious injury or death by offenses like speeding, running red lights, following too closely, or holding your phone — sadly, it's still legal to distract your mind while you're driving, but that's a fight for another day — say, but he didn't mean to. The Public Defender's Office, state lawmakers, and others use this argument, and they mean that the crash and horrible results were accidents. The driver didn't intend to crash, much less cause all that harm. There are at least 2 flaws in this argument. The most obvious is that the drunk drivers didn't mean to either, but we punished them severely. The other flaw is that the drivers didn't mean not to either. They didn't take well-known precautions to avoid the risk. They made a conscious choice to break that law, come what may. It can even be argued that drunk or drug drivers are less culpable because when they make the decision to drive dangerously, their judgment, their ability to make wise choices is already impaired. This is not the case with the other drivers when they make their choice to drive dangerously. The conclusion? I'm not asking you to address these other moving violations. That's the state's job, and I'll keep working at that level. But the state distracted driving law has a specific provision allowing stronger local penalties. Our city attorney has put much thought into her proposed language. So I'm asking you to have the compassion and the courage to use that provision and put these proposed penalties into Section 333.11 of our traffic code. Even if you decide not to use these stronger penalties in our code, I'm extremely proud that my city for being this responsive to these concerns and the requests of individual citizens. Who says you can't fight City Hall? And Tricia and I didn't even have to fight. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Montgomery, and just to add, thank you for your continued advocacy. I know I've only started my 3rd year on council, but I've always appreciated your efforts and your advocacy before us. Thank you. Madam City Attorney.
Thank you, and thank you, Sharon, as well. I did also collaborate with and consult with the police department, and so I would like to ask Chief Spence if he has any comments he would like to add about these substantive changes.
Good evening, Chief.
Good evening. So we reviewed the code. I think the bicycle work we did earlier last year went through. There were some outdated sections, and then trying to update it with operational reality. The second piece, as you heard, taking the unclassified misdemeanor that is the state statute for distracted driving, and giving it escalating offense levels, that gives us the ability to potentially order in based on driving record and the like. So it does give us a few more tools in the toolbox with these amendments. And again, appreciate the opportunity to work through the traffic code. We have a lot of work to do, a lot with our code, and it went fairly smooth. So we're in favor of the changes as they're presented.
Thank you, Chief.
And thank you, Chief.
Anything from my colleagues? Mrs. McGregor.
I don't have a problem with having stiffer penalties. I just have a problem with only us having stiffer penalties, only Gahanna. I mean, how does that, I mean, who's going to know that we have a stiffer penalty then? I mean,
Well, I think that the state envisioned that local municipalities would in fact take interest in having stiffer penalties. And I think that the fact that we may be the first in this area right now does not mean we'll be the last by any means. I would also indicate that there are other code sections, and I would have to do a little bit more research, on particularly which ones, but I believe the reckless driving statute, as well as others, in which Gahanna does have stricter penalties than the state statute. And so this is not a novel concept to have, and I don't believe that it is unfair because the prohibition is the same. And in fact, the first level offense is exactly the same as the state statute. But what our statute would, or our ordinance would do is target the repeat offenders and the offenders that cause serious bodily harm or death. And so I think that with any law, when you're on the roads, you're presumed to know the laws of the road.
Yes, but if we're the only ones that have the stricter penalties, who knows that? Who knows that other than a few people? I'm just asking if that's.
There would need to be an education piece, some public notice and information about this, especially in Gahanna, and I think that is something that bears some consideration. But again, this is not the first time that we have considered this kind of change, and so I don't think that is something that's insurmountable.
Can you, not tonight, but can you look up the other times we've done this with different penalties?
Yes.
Than the state law? Okay.
Absolutely.
Jeff, do you have?
So a few years ago, and I can't remember when that changed, but we brought forward the escalation of willful and wanton disregard for safety. That was kind of in stopgap measure when the initial distracted driving kind of fizzled out at the state level. I'm not sure what year that was, but we had used willful and wanton disregard for safety and citing the distraction element, and that's when we came to council and that was changed. I would say pre-COVID, maybe 2019, 2018 timeframe, but we can certainly look that up. But that is an example of when we did change a degree of of an offense.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Mrs. Padova?
I do think that there should be some sort of communication. I'm not sure if there's any talk of that or discussion of that. I don't know if it could be something that could go in one of the, yes, uniquely Gahanna, since that's something that goes out quarterly to all of the residents. That might be an idea.
Maybe something at the high school too.
Yes.
Absolutely.
New drivers.
Yeah.
I would suggest that the most effective way, if you want to truly, rather than uniquely Gahanna, because those tend to be features on residents and businesses, would actually be a newsletter. Like we send out alerts all the time via Gov Delivery. When there is sometimes surveys, the surveys go out, but all the agendas go out via Gov Delivery. That would probably be the quickest and most effective way to communicate that. Water bills are also a good location. We're now doing, since This Week News went out, a lot of residents talk about the fact that they don't get enough information, so we are now endeavoring to do inserts within the water bills, so we can include something in that as well.
Ms. Bowers?
Thank you. Well, I was inspired by Mr. Renner to share a little law school theory. So if you'll indulge me, I just wanted to give some comments tonight on this. So remembering back to 1L crim law, I'm thinking maybe Mayor Jadwin and Ms. Tamilarison might recall. I had a professor who spent a lot of time talking about the 4 major goals that were usually attributed to punishment or sentencing. So the 4 theories of sentencing. And they are retribution, rehabilitation, deterrence, and incapacitation. Rehabilitation and deterrence and incapacitation are all forward-looking theories of punishment. That is, they look to the future in deciding what to do in the present. The shared goal of all 3 is crime prevention. Either we rehabilitate the offender, we deter offenders from committing this offense in the future, or we incapacitate those who are incapable of refraining from the act. Conversely, retribution is a backward-looking theory of punishment that looks to what happened and its impact in order to determine a proportionate and appropriate consequence. Making available an escalating consequence enables judges to determine a more proportionate sentence, taking into consideration all mitigating and aggravating factors. I'm very grateful that I think that this proposed consequence of a third-degree misdemeanor for serious injury and a first-degree misdemeanor, if death is caused, allows appropriate discretion by our judges and allows the 4 theories of punishment to be taken into consideration. It does not mandate jail time. It still maintains these as misdemeanor offenses, but allows the court to appropriate determine all aggravating factors, including the impact on victims. I do support the amendments to the traffic code, and I thank City Attorney Tam Larison, Chief Spence, Mrs. Montgomery, and Mrs. Kovacs, along with prior City Attorney Malarski and Mr. Roth, for all your hard work, research, and discussion in bringing this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Powers. I believe I saw Ms. Jones.
Yeah, thank you to Ms. Montgomery, Mrs. Kovacs, and to the city. As a resident, I am proud we're going in this direction. I think my question was in clarification of the communication. So we've talked about newsletters, we've talked about water bills. Those go out to residents. Is that the primary offenders that we're seeing? So would we be missing, and I don't know who answers that, that's a chief question, but is communicating to the residents enough? I will say I am torn on, yes, I believe we need to communicate to residents, but if the law is the law, you know not to break the law. It's just the penalties, and how often are we communicating all of the penalties to everything that the city has, I guess is my question.
Maybe we could possibly work with our PIO, and I know that there'd been some outreach to media outlets for some coverage on local networks to address the change, which may inspire other communities to follow suit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all for regional uniformity.
Saw Ms. Spadova's hand.
So the initial, your first offense, it's the same.
Correct. For any first offense within 2 years, it is the exact same as the state statute with the penalties. We call it a minor misdemeanor, but the fine is the same, the maximum fine is the same, the penalties are the same. You can still have the option of taking a class in lieu of the fine or points. So those are all the same, but we're just calling it a minor misdemeanor versus unclassified.
So it's just a second offense. So
A second in 2 years escalates the offense, or serious bodily harm or death. Those are the 3 things that can escalate. So repeat offenses, injury, or death.
So really, if somebody, if they have a first offense, they could be notified then that if you offend again.
Correct. Correct.
Anything further from my colleagues on this item? Yes, Mr. Renner.
Yeah, I want to thank Councilwoman Bowers for the very in-depth legal discussion that we had. And I applaud her for bringing up the 4 theories of punishment, because I think that that is actually very apropos, not just to this narrative that we're having here, but also the justice and the equity of justice throughout, and all the narratives that our society is having. So I strongly implore you to please go back and look at the record of what Councilwoman Bowers was actually talking about. Sit with her and look it up yourself. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Renner. If folks are comfortable, on for first on the February 19th, and then for a vote on March 4th. Regular agenda for that one? Consent? Regular? All right. Thank you, everyone, for all of your efforts on this. Looking forward to next steps. All right. Next, items from the Planning Commission. Director Blackford, I believe. You're looking at the screen as though something should be appearing.
Yep,
Okay.
and it's not, so let me try again.
I also appreciate a good song and dance, Director, so feel free to.
That's why I am
Feel free
not-
to improvise.
That's why I am not performing here. Stuff of nightmares. About that. I wish I could. So, all right, here momentarily, we'll get the presentation on the screen, hopefully.
Apologies to everyone for the technical difficulties this evening. That looks promising.
Just wanted that extra anticipation, because I know you've all been waiting patiently for a zoning code rewrite discussion. And appreciate your patience these many years. Tonight, won't go into great detail about every little thing with the zoning code. We aren't asking for any action tonight. It'll be back before you in March. But did want to go over a few items, how we got to this point, and maybe some sections of code maybe to pay special attention to. So a little bit of the what, why, and how we got to this point. This is the zoning code, which is Chapter 11 of our codified ordinances. It is one of the chapters that folks have to abide by and adhere to as they're going through the development process. There's other, Chapter 9, Chapter 13, there's state codes, there's county regulations as well. So this is just one component, but a major component of the development process. This is a brand-new document, that's why you don't have a red line. If you look at, say, like Chapter 1105, it's going to be different in the new code than compared to the old code. So again, it's a new document there for you. We'll go in a little bit more detail here, like why are we making these changes? Why have we spent the time and effort to rewrite our code? But there are some challenges. It was written in 1958 originally. It's grown over time. But like everything in life, when it's from 1958 till now, needs to be changed. Now is a good time for not making Band-Aid approach change, but making a starting from scratch. Anytime you have a document like that, there's going to be things that need to improve, but there's a lot of successes associated with that. We'll cover some of those. So what are some of the challenges that we as staff have dealt with from our external and internal customers? A lot of it just has to do with the actual document itself. It's close to 400 pages. If you were to print it out, it's grown over time. It's a challenging document for folks to even crack open and go through and kind of actually understand what they're looking for. So with that in mind, we tried to create a code that was a little bit more user-friendly. We have maybe just one glossary instead of 2 or 3 like in our current code. From 400 pages down to about 200 pages. We tried to organize things so things were only located in one section of code rather than 4 or 5 places. Again, trying to get people to be able to not have a code that's so scary that they're afraid to actually go in and open it and look at it. Process is a big thing in every community. That's one of the things staff have heard, an opportunity to improve the process. Really in Gahanna, what does that look like? Well, it's going to look different in every community, but in Gahanna, really, we didn't find a need from the public or from the land use plan, anything that said that we needed to have major changes to our process. So you're not going to see a lot of changes to it, but you are going to see some tweaks, and I'll cover that in a little more detail. One of the items that we heard probably the most consistently since I've been here, almost 10 years now, going back to, I think, Go Forward Gahanna, this was a large component of that document, was the need for Gahanna to have more design standards, a little bit different architecture. And As we went through the process of trying to extract that from the community, that was not a specific architectural style like some communities. You don't have to have Georgian architecture, Art Moderne. It was coming up with something a little bit more than what we have, and I'll show an example of that momentarily. And then uses. Uses are always a big thing in every community. Again, when you're writing a code in 1958, I believe the population of Gahanna was just under 3,000 folks. That document gets tweaked, but obviously when you're a growing community, maybe your uses and what you're trying to accomplish, obviously that changes over time. So refining that, being a little bit more mindful. What's not changing? Successes of the document. I know I just talked about process and uses, but there's a lot of process and uses that aren't proposed to change because there wasn't any issues identified with those areas. So the vast majority of our process, there's no change to it. What does that mean? That means if it's, as of today, if it's an administrative process or a public hearing process, chances are that is not changing. There is one or two applications where that would change. We're getting rid of, there's only one pre-application or preliminary application requirement in Gahanna that I'm aware of, and that was with plat. We don't even have plats very often. We're removing that requirement. That's something that staff, as we've talked with Planning Commission throughout the years, eliminating an unnecessary step. So we're really eliminating one application. We're combining some applications, and then we have this de minimis variance up there. If you follow our Planning Commission agendas, you may recall that in our last meeting in December, we had a variance request for a 6-inch setback, a de minimis variance that would fall under that new requirement. That's something that our Planning Commission has routinely said, we don't want to see these types of items. We're okay with those being administratively approved. Uses, so we talked about process uses, radical change is not necessary, meaning that throughout, whether it was land use plan, whether it was our in-person engagement, online engagement, community, no one identified a need to really start over, which is great, because that would have been really surprising. So that means, where you have residential areas, they're going to stay residential. Where your commercial corridors are, south of Taylor Road, we have an established industrial area, that's going to stay industrial in nature. So again, we're tweaking things, it's not a massive overhaul. So how do we do this? This was me in my parents' dark basement drinking Mountain Dew coming up with all these changes. It was not. We engaged with the community. Some of you may recall the Mill Street Market. We were out there. I think that was from like 9 to 4. It was really only in the last half an hour of that engagement we did not have any visitors. We pretty much had multiple people at our booth all day long, which was great because we reached a very different audience and we got a lot of great feedback. We didn't stop there though. We also had engagement with our seniors at the Senior Center. We had a couple of open houses here at City Hall. We also were at the Business First breakfast that we had a few months ago over at the Gahanna Library, which the Gahanna events are always the most attended events for Business First. So that was great. So we reached a lot of folks in person, a lot of folks who normally maybe aren't involved in changes to a zoning code or a similar type of document. We also had some online engagement. This process has been going on for a few years. COVID was hot and heavy when we really first started getting into the engagement process. So we did have online engagement as part of that. We've had workshops with City Council and Planning Commission. We've had a number of discussion items with Planning Commission. Why am I talking with Planning Commission? Because a lot of the changes, they're the board that sees the majority of zoning code requests. Land use plan, we went through that. I know a couple of you folks on City Council were on the land use plan committee. That was approved back in 2019. The main purpose of that document is really to influence the zoning code. So there's a lot of influence from the land use plan in our zoning code. It is not a one-for-one. A lot of things in the land use plan, I would say, were very aspirational, and it might have talked about densities of 50, 60 units an acre, which is not something that I think is really actually appropriate in Gahanna. So it's not like everything that was in the land use plan was then in the zoning code. So we were mindful of what some of those suggestions were. And obviously, we have a consultant working on this. They're more in touch than with staff is with some of those national trends, some best practices. They provide a legal review as well. They do a lot more than that. Just to touch on a couple of the main differences in the proposed code over the current code. Probably for me and in my world, probably the biggest change is actually for right up here. This is our design standards in the city. So if you're a developer and you were going to develop a piece of property on Hamilton Road, chances are your design standards would be reflective of that first bullet point under the current code. So our current code would say for Hamilton Road, you need to have quality materials, and you need to have a harmonious relationship between your building's colors and your neighbor's building colors. That's very subjective, even by zoning code standards. There's a lot of subjectivity in some zoning code standards. This is bad subjectivity. That doesn't provide the type of guidance that we should be providing to folks and that. So we're getting away from, again, universal harmony as a design standard and coming up with specifics. Again, we don't have specific architectural styles like some communities, but we do have more specifics. So now we have prohibited and permitted materials. These are materials that the community said believe are appropriate. And those are going to change based on the area, because obviously probably makes sense to have more design standards in our Creekside area than it would be in our manufacturing part of town. So again, we're getting away from generic statements and trying to have specifics. What we want to do, and I think what a lot of communities are looking for, again, this is some of the national trends we see in code, is they don't want to prescribe a specific architecture, but they don't want the standard, just this is what we do everywhere in every community. So the language is to elevate sort of that standard design. Uses, again, kind of spoke towards uses. All the feedback we had, especially the engagement out at Mill Street, a lot of folks had some thoughts on uses. Again, I think a lot of folks are, is my community, my subdivision going to stay residential? Yes, absolutely. There's no change to uses, and probably 70% of the city, which is zone residential, there's really no changes there. We did hear from folks that they weren't real keen on some of the 24/7 operations, a little bit of concern, especially with those in our, more of our residential areas. And there was some, people wanted to see more residential opportunities, so more residential and commercial. Again, that's sort of a national trend as well, with reutilizing some retail areas and office spaces. That's kind of what we heard from the feedback, and how that translated to code was NC, that is neighborhood commercial zoning. We have that zoning district now, but if you were to look at the uses that are allowed in that zoning and neighborhood zoning, they're very similar to our more intense commercial areas. And most zoning codes would have a much wider variety of uses. So in other words, the neighborhood commercial areas are really geared towards daytime operations, getting away from 24/7 operations, which is, again, very common in zoning codes, but our code maybe was a little lacking in that area. So again, getting away from auto-oriented uses that would be more regional in nature, and getting, again, more towards your professional offices, those personal services, barbers, nail salons, things of that nature, restaurants, and again, getting away from things that operate at night, like bars and nightclubs and things like that our current code would allow for. Residential permitted in commercial general, there's very limited areas that would be zoned commercial general. Those would be on major roadways for the most part, like Hamilton Road, Granville Street, areas like that, where again you see established retail corridors or office areas, allowing some residential as a reuse. Again, not through a staff level, but through a conditional use, is one of the biggest changes in our code. There's a few other sections of changes I would point out to you all. Doesn't display really well, but our zoning map went from about 26 jurisdictions to 13. It's still going to look like a Jackson Pollock painting. There's colors everywhere. But again, when you're creating a zoning map for a community that's growing compared to where we're at now, we have to be a little bit more mindful. We don't need the 26 different designations. We don't have that kind of growth that really required that level of differential between those zonings. Green initiatives, we do have some green initiatives in the zoning code. We have code language to require EV charging stations in our larger parking areas. So that would be in larger parking lots. That would be a requirement. Language to encourage green roofs. Language to allow for renewable energy, solar panels on roofs, things of that nature. ADUs, what's an ADU? That stands for an accessory dwelling unit. That's something that I know that I believe council's had a couple of folks come in and give talks about the housing crisis and what are some initiatives that communities are doing. Accessory dwelling units is probably like the lowest hanging fruit of those. I would just encourage you all to take a look at that language. Again, I think I talked about some minor changes to the process. Approving, you might not know if you were going, City Hall wanted to get rid of one parking space and make that a loading area, that technically requires a public hearing. Planning Commission routinely has said, we don't see any value in taking those kind of requests. So again, we're making just a few things administrative in nature. Those have been vetted with Planning Commission to give you some idea. Again, if you're changing a parking lot, you're changing your parking lot lighting, things of that nature, could be approved administratively. What are some things that we discussed but didn't implement? I just talked about green initiatives, but I'm going to call this one green infrastructure. This was brought up, I know, at our workshop here. It was also definitely brought up at some of our meetings with the community. I know green infrastructure, that's definitely development related, but it's really not a zoning code issue. I know our consultant kind of spoke to that, so you're not going to see bioswales or things of that nature in the zoning code because that's infrastructure, and that's typically not part of the zoning code. Very similar for short-term rentals. Again, zoning codes typically don't regulate things by ownership type. Consultant recommended if that's something that we were interested in, if we had a licensing portion of our code or business regulations, it would be located there. Housing trends, you don't want to hear me go into all the details of what the nation's doing for housing trends, but a lot of them I would say, from my discussions with the public and you all, aren't appropriate in Gahanna. A lot of those trends are to allow, when I say housing, I mean all types of housing, whether that's apartments, whether that's tiny homes, whether that's townhomes, everywhere. That's the national trend. No rezonings, it's allowed everywhere. National trends are not to have, say, a maximum density, but a minimum density, things of that nature. Those are things that we could have, applied here. Those are not things that community, expressed a real desire for. So we didn't incorporate those into our code changes. Our consultant brought this one up. As much as staff may like not having to regulate parking anymore, that's something, again, that a lot of codes are going towards, not requiring parking minimums, but something, again, we didn't see was appropriate here in Gahanna. Finishing up here, 2 more slides. Planning Commission, they heard this back just a couple of weeks ago, January 24th. They did recommend approval. At that time, we did have a couple of discussion items, so the document's a little bit different than what they saw, but we did discuss with them. They gave us some direction. Hotels were allowed in neighborhood commercial, which we didn't realize, so that was changed. They were okay with that. We did have a member of the public talk about a certain type of traffic circulation signage, although everyone agreed that that made sense. It wasn't something that was deemed appropriate in the zoning code, maybe in a different code. And then there was discussion about private schools in our innovation and manufacturing district. So all those changes, that was something that Planning Commission wanted to see. All those changes are in your documents that you have before you. And again, they did recommend this unanimously. My last slide here, I'd like to just talk about what maybe we can and can't expect if the zoning code gets adopted. I think a lot of the changes are going to be subtle in nature. So maybe zoning staff, when we get a phone call, it might take us 10 minutes to walk them through a process and get them to understand what the rules are when before it took 20 minutes or multiple phone calls. I mean, that's a lot of what we're going to see. Planning Commission, they should expect to see fewer applications. A lot of that is just because of the consolidation in our application requests. I think the most important one is that there's going to be more consistency and predictability. And that is from everybody's standpoint. That is a developer. And you may recall my favorite stat to tell people is that in local government, after infrastructure, it's your predictability of your permit process is the most influential to development. So if you want to promote economic development, having a predictable permitting process is one of the top things that a jurisdiction can do. So when you have a code that goes away from statements like harmonious colors and materials and you get to specifics, that's what these national folks want to see. That's what companies want to know. They want to know what they can expect when they come to your community. So I think this document gets us moving in that direction considerably more than where we're at now. Also, though, from a community member standpoint, you have a better understanding of what that built environment is supposed to look like. So again, it helps internal and external folks having those expectations. And what we shouldn't expect is that this is a common one. This is one that, again, in like engaging with the community at some of these events, they say, well, why don't you just stop this and that? Don't let these people come here. And it's like, that's not the way any of this works. So whether it's this code or any future code, as a property owner, I might own a lot in the middle of a subdivision. I might think it's a great idea to put a power plant there. Now, obviously, that probably doesn't make any sense, but they have the right to make that request. Whether it's this code, the proposed code, current code, it's not going to stop that kind of request. They have the right to make, go to a public hearing. And I would not expect radical or rapid change, meaning, if you live in a residential area, if this code gets adopted, you're not going to wake up and see hotels and, high rises, things of that nature. And it's not going to be rapid because some zoning codes will have sunset provisions that say you have to do this by a certain date. Those are rare. We don't have any sunset provisions. So again, development change is going to happen as developments come online. It's not because you adopt something, all of a sudden, the world's going to be a very different place. So it will take time before we see this document get implemented and that. So again, sorry for the rambling presentation here. That was a little less than me normally. I do have an item after this, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Maybe take questions first here. Thank you, Director. Thank you for all of your work on this, not only with us, but with Planning Commission, as well as the outreach to the public. Certainly appreciate it. I know you and your staff have put in a lot of blood, sweat, and I'm going to guess some tears here and there. So it is appreciated. I'm happy to see we're at this point. So any questions, comments from my colleagues? Ms. Bowers?
Thank you, Director Blackford. I wanted to talk a little bit further about accessory dwelling unit and the language that you have. I think I found it predominantly around like page 52, defining kind of what that accessory dwelling unit can do and how much it should be, and then identified as being a conditional use in most of the residential zoning types. Is that right?
That sounds correct, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, do you want to talk a little bit more about how you came up with the recommendations, or kind of what the theory is behind what's being recommended in the code?
For accessory dwelling units, I would say that the theory is that accessory dwelling units help ever so slightly take a little bit of the burden off of housing, because accessory dwelling units, the way it's written in most accessory dwelling unit language, is that it's like a smaller home. So think about it sort of like a detached garage where somebody's living out of. That's really what they're meant to be. And it's meant to be for anyone. So you buy a home, you want to have a smaller accessory home, and that could be open to anyone. It could be open to a family member or a non-family member. But it's, like I said, it's probably the low-hanging fruit that communities do to help address the housing crisis, because it's allows for, I think the consultant said like Portland, which is probably the most progressive planning city out there, and there's like less than 50 of these in the entire city of Portland. So it's not something that most folks want to utilize, but it's certainly something that could be utilized.
When we were at the workshop last year, I recall that this came up and there was some light discussion with the consultant about potential restrictions around use with the ADUs. Was that explored or pursued any further?
No.
Okay. And then I know that you identified up here that you weren't going to use, that you were not presenting short-term rental legislation in tandem with this. Are you continuing to work on that? Are you continuing to explore that?
I haven't started. I haven't been asked to.
Okay. I understand, we've definitely had a lot of dialogue in here around the housing crisis in the region, and I understand that there is a lot of push for us to find additional housing units to be able to help release some of the regional burden. I continue to have some concerns around ADUs. I know that they have not necessarily played out to be as horrific, as some of the worst case scenario fears have been. But my concern really lies with the number of out-of-state investors that have been buying real estate in Central Ohio, and how an ADU could be used to increase the profitability, not necessarily being owned by a local owner. And so that doesn't really alleviate, in fact, that doesn't alleviate anything to do with the housing burden. It exacerbates it. So I have real hesitation with ADUs being proposed without restrictions and without a short-term rental. I apologize. I thought we had spoken about this, but I do hope that it comes forward, that a short-term rental registration code comes forward, or some type of other restriction. Okay, thank you.
Just to address your question about accessory dwelling units, if you want to have, and there are restrictions like on the size, but there needs to be more. If we don't want them, that's an easy one to remove. So if it's not something that Gahanna's not comfortable with, I've got no qualms with removing it.
Well,
and that, or if we want to have the family members, I want to say the consultant kind of.
The consultant gave some indication that it might be legally permissible to restrict it to a relative or a family member, so that it could be truly a mother-in-law suite.
Yes.
And
I think absolutely. Codes have those. Yeah, if that's what we want, we can do that. That doesn't really address the housing issue because then it's generational housing issue, which is an issue, but not taking quite as big a bite out of the apple. So yeah, whatever council wants.
I don't to your point, though, I don't think that this is going to have a massive impact on number of housing units across the region, and I only see it as potentially causing lots of headaches for neighbors.
Wouldn't necessarily disagree. So this is something we can easily have back before you if we're going to see you again. Let's say, I believe March 4th. Like I said, we can have something before you. For that meeting, if we want to have take a stand.
I'm one of 7, so I'm putting out my opinion here on this. But I would be very interested in my other colleagues to see if there was interest in potentially negotiating or kind of making sure that we're not adding to the problem of short-term rentals.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mrs. McGregor.
I wasn't going to bring it up this time. But I have concerns with the ADUs too, only from the sense of infrastructure. I mean, our streets, you're talking about more cars, more use of the plumbing, the water lines, sewer capacity. And so those are my concerns. Like some neighborhoods you drive through, the parking is very tight already because they were built in a time when people had only one car, and now they have two cars and then kids driving, and so adding another, unit where you have cars is just, I mean, to me, that's part of the big thing is with them is,
Whatever we want to do with accessory dwelling units, I am 100% okay with.
We'll be the bad guys regionally.
I hadn't even thought of the idea of outside investors buying a house and then adding another unit behind it because they could, and then,
Yeah, the challenge is, and that's what we run into, is that the initial approval's easy enough, but then when that home transfers ownership and they get told certain things, it's a lot different conversation, and trying to enforce that gets a lot more problematic. So I think that was part of what the consultant, yeah, there's plenty of codes out there that restrict it to a family member. It's just the enforcement of that gets tricky. But whatever we want, we can craft more code language to have more guidelines, so that pool of potential folks might shrink down. And if we want to have a family member component to it, something like that, like I said,
I'm fine. I mean, if that's legally acceptable, I think that addresses some of, I think that having intergenerational housing is important and can be a benefit. And if that does help a family, then I'm all for it.
and that might be maybe that's a more appropriate step, is to make this incremental step where it's, like you said, it's generational housing. We could always, come back year, 5 years, whatever it is, and maybe start opening up that more if it becomes appropriate. But we can work on language there. That's absolutely.
Thank you, Director. Madam Mayor, were you on this topic?
It was really with regard to the short-term rentals. So if there's another comment first on ADUs, go
I was
ahead.
going to address, I guess, the accessory dwelling units, if I may. And just to add a little bit of data on it real quick. So Columbus MSA population is significantly over 2 million. So, we're not a small region anymore. The city of Gahanna, last I looked, and granted it's been a few years, but it was something like 13,500 households, and this includes apartments. So quite literally, if we doubled the number of households in the city of Gahanna, so something that is practically impossible to do, we would not put a dent in the housing crisis in the region. So while it might be an admirable goal, when we're considering, future development and those types of things, I just want us to maybe refocus on what's good for the city of Gahanna, as opposed to trying to solve a regional matter that we don't have the ability to solve. So if we want to limit it to family members, to allow for mother-in-law suite, that'd be a nice thing. I would venture to guess we would get 2 or 3 of those over the span of maybe a half a decade or something. But I don't think it's going to move the needle one bit with regard to the regional housing crunch that we're running into.
Madam Mayor?
Did you want to piggyback on that?
Yes. So I don't know legally if this would be a possibility, to have it be, rather than a family member living in it, that it be owner occupied.
The primary dwelling
yes.
unit would be owner
Thank you.
occupied. There's a little more accountability there.
Yes, because I think that in regards to neighbors, and I know that has been an issue, that if the person has to live next to whoever is living in the accessory dwelling unit, then I think there's a little bit more accountability.
Yep.
That would be my preference, rather than family member.
Madam Mayor?
Actually, I'm going to respond to that and then go to what I was going to talk about, because I'll segue. So, Councilman, you're absolutely right. I mean, Gahanna in and of itself is not going to make a dent into the regional crisis that we have with regard to housing. That being said, as we add jobs, as we have a very diverse resident base here, and making sure that we have that inventory of affordable options for all generations in our community, I think still is something that we have to deal with. And I really like the conversation just now around the owner-occupied for a mother-in-law suite or grandmother suite, what have you, because that will help actually with the older generation to create an affordable housing option for them. So maybe there is something that we can work on in that regard. What I was going to go back to is the short-term rental conversation that you had. We had a very high-level conversation around the fact that short-term rentals are a problem. And if I remember what the consultant said, that it's a problem that's not necessarily easily solved. I don't know that that is encompassed within this zoning code. I think that is a whole separate project that needs to be evaluated. And I know Councilwoman Padova and I have had conversations. It's something Visit Gahanna is looking at because it certainly impacts that. And that is on the whiteboard of us to look at. But it's not, I think that's too big of a piece to fit within this zoning code rewrite. But if there is an appetite from council, we can certainly take a look at that. And I know the City of Columbus has some legislation, I believe, and there are other municipalities. The tourism world is looking at that, the CVB world, from what Director Kappas has shared with me. So I think there's an opportunity for some collaboration and sharing information and working toward a longer-term solution in that regard.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe Ms. Jones had a question. Yes.
I'm good. I think we covered it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything further on this item? Okay, so I, again, just want to reiterate my thanks for all of the efforts on this. I do want to note for the public that we are scheduled to have 2 public hearings on March 4th and March 18th, with the possible vote slated for March 18th. Any desire for this to come back to committee at this time?
Yes, for the ADU, like for
Okay.
an ADU revision, yeah.
All right. Would you prefer that?
Whenever, at the director's discretion.
Okay. 2 weeks from?
Yes,
is that
absolutely.
possible?
Yep,
Okay.
be happy
So
to.
before the
Thank you.
4th, but it'll be,
The advantage of it coming on before the 4th is that we don't have to do an amendment after it goes through first reading.
Yeah. That's plenty of time for us to do this kind of change, so no worries from our end.
thank you. So we will plan for this to come back to committee, Mr. Clerk, in 2 weeks' time. Thank you. All right. I think with that, we're okay to move to the next item, Director.
Yes, so
Please,
the other
Director.
item on tonight's agenda for Department of Planning is changes to our fee schedule, and it's really the zoning portion of our building and zoning fee schedule. The changes are being made for one of 3 reasons. There's only a few changes, but the main reason is because with the proposed zoning code, our processes change a little bit. So a few of our applications go away. Our design review goes away because that's being consolidated into our development plan application. The preliminary plat's being removed because we're removing that application. The other changes, 2 fees are increasing. The fence fee is increasing from $25 to $50. That brings it in line with all of our other applications and processes, and a fence permit does involve other departments and things of that nature. So we do feel it would be appropriate to raise that. And then the floodplain use permit increasing from $100 to $150. That is a very technical review, probably the most technical application. A lot of times that requires a third-party consultant. We don't always know when that's going to be, but just try to offset those costs ever so slightly. In case you're curious, fence permits range from about $25 to $200. Looking at jurisdictions within this region, floodplain ranges from $100 to like $3,000. So we're still on the low end for fees. And then a couple of the additions on there. One is master sign plan. We've had that application in process. It just hasn't been on our fee schedule for some reason. So again, just a few tweaks to the fee schedule. Since these are related to the zoning code, ideally these would have to go on the same agenda for adoption and that, so they're effective at the same time. So we do thank you for that. Obviously available for any questions, sir.
Thank you, Director. Any discussion from my colleagues on this item? Yes, Mrs. McGregor?
Just, is that a new fence or a replacement fence, or is it either?
So the code, the fence language for the code hasn't changed, where if it's a replacement of the same exact fence and height, location, you don't need a permit. So that would still be exempt. It would be for new or replacement fences that weren't exempt from that process, yes.
Anything else on this item? I just had a quick question and this probably speaks more to the previous item, Director. If somebody has already submitted an application under our current code, are they grandfathered throughout the process under that code, assuming, I filed a design review application?
Yes, yes, so that is 100% correct. And I know like our building team's dealing with that because the state building code has changed. So if you submit an application, it's whatever code is in process is in place at that time. Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any concerns with having this on for the 4th and the 18th then following? All right. No need to come back on this particular item to committee? All right. Thank you very much, Director.
Thank you all.
All right. Last but not least, this evening, we have items from council office. Mr. Clerk, turn things over to you for this one.
I don't have anything further to add other than I did send council the process should you desire to object to a liquor license permit. I had outlined what the Department of Commerce had posted on their website.
All right, thank you, Mr. Clerk. Ms. Bowers?
Yes, thank you. I had requested that this matter come back to committee for further discussion. There were some questions that were raised because there was just a little bit of uncertainty around what the entity was because it was a little bit unfamiliar. I do also note that the location is directly across from the new high school. And while there are additional locations proximate to the high school, they are known entities. I understand that their applicant maybe is present tonight, and I don't know if you wanted to come address the application. If you could please state your name and affiliation with the permit request.
Sure. Working? Yep. My name is Gavin Gooden. I was a resident of Gahanna, now moved to Blacklick, but the application has been submitted by Eagle Academy. We have a fundraising arm called Campus & Co, who operate the store across from the high school, and we're seeking a wine and beer resale license to serve the shoppers that come to our store. It's a small boutique store that sells groceries and normal household goods to members, which none of the students at the school would be members. So there wouldn't be any concern about that for alcoholic, but all the regulations will be abided by according to the age restrictions and things like that. What we're asking for is no different to what BP across the road would have. But does that answer your questions about who we are and what we do?
Yeah, so you mentioned that it's a members grocery store.
Correct.
How does one become a member?
Sure, it's servicing our church community, Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. We've been operating the church on Stigler Road, Stigler and Wendler Boulevard for about 30 years. And it's just a local store that the members can shop, and every dollar profit raised goes to pay for a school.
Okay. And is that what kind of school is that?
It's a high school. It's a church religious school.
I noticed on the website for Campus & Co. that it indicated that it was staffed by volunteers.
That's correct.
And could you talk more about the training of the volunteers?
For sure. So the volunteers come from within the community, and it's typically mostly it's made up of the mothers, but there's many of people like myself. I'm one of the department managers, and we go through a training process where we're certified to be used to work at the store, and particularly the controls come in the purchasing sides, making sure we keep to our purchasing limits, and there's training on the cashier side. There's some I'm trying to think of the right word. There's some intricacies. I can't say that word. I'm sorry. Special things we have to know around the checkout, because some items are age restricted, like alcohol would be. So that's all part of that volunteer onboarding.
Okay. I don't have any other questions. I will have comments, though. Thank you.
Any other, oh, yes, Ms. Padova, then Ms. McGregor.
Did you say you guys are already open, or?
Yes, we are, yes.
Okay, I didn't know that you guys were operating already. Thank you.
Yep.
Ms. McGregor?
So only members of your church can buy from this store, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so there's really just, students aren't going to be in and out picking up?
No.
Okay, all right.
I guess, is there like a membership card? How do you know if I walk in, if I'm your church is your church community small enough?
It's very small.
Okay, so you know everybody. Okay.
Everybody. I
Got
think
it.
Chief Spence knows us all as well.
Okay.
Hopefully not because of traffic tickets.
Wait.
Sorry, I shouldn't have made a joke.
No, sure.
It's okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
I have a comment. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gooden, for being here, and thank you for shedding a little bit more light on Campus & Co. I continue to express my reservations, and at next meeting intend to make a motion that we object on the basis that there is no way to do a controlled buy, and there is no way to monitor compliance with liquor laws. In retail stores where liquor is being sold, law enforcement has the ability to go in and do a controlled buy in order to ensure compliance with liquor laws. That would be impossible to occur at this location and in this type of setting. There are other liquor facilities and plenty of other carryout places across the region. I understand that there's an assurance that high school students would not access this location, but to that end, there's also plenty of saturation in the area. So I maintain my objection on this liquor license. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bowers. I would just add that I share some of the concerns that have been noted already. So, Mr. Clerk, for the agenda for next week, then, what would be needed?
I guess I would defer to Attorney Tamilarison. Would a resolution be appropriate here that would specify the objection, or would it just be a simple motion that's voted on by council?
I believe a resolution would be sufficient, but I would need to look into that.
I only ask because I'm not sure what we've done to object in what form that's come through council before.
Chief, I would...
I know when we last did it, so I think it's probably somewhere memorialized in records and of council, and it would just take a little bit of digging for us to find out when we did it the last time, so.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you, Chief. Yeah, Mr. Gooden.
I was wondering if there would be some way we could develop a security protocol that would allow us to sell the beer and the wine. Maybe it was kept in a controlled area with controlled access that a maximum of maybe 5 people had access to. That would meet our needs. Because we weren't thinking of storing large amounts of consumer carry items. It's mainly the main thing we're trying to serve to our community was the wine. Personally, there's some wine I used to enjoy in Australia I can't get at my local stores. And I've got a large number of my family members that live in Gahanna and New Albany and Blacklick. I was hoping to be able to stock it there versus bring it in from out of state. We do have an area in the back of the store which wouldn't be hard to put security on, which would limit the amount of people who have access to it. If that would leverage some of your concerns, I definitely realise your concerns. And if the police do want to gain access to the building, they can do that anytime. It's somewhere there most day, every day. I'm happy to take you over there and have a look as well, if that would help.
I would just refer you to, there's lots of, I would refer you to council. I don't know that what we could come up with in terms of a solution to address the concerns. But certainly if at some point, there's a whole process. If a objection were to pass by a majority of council, then there's a whole hearing process that you would be entitled to. And at that, prior to that, or I suppose or after that, subsequent to that, you came up with a solution and wanted to apply for a permit again, I think certainly the city would be receptive to hearing solutions that were presented.
Okay. I would be willing to keep it off site as well, if that would make more sense.
I don't think, we don't have a mechanism by which to enforce that, though. Once the permit has been licensed, we lose that ability to monitor that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion on this item? Mr. Clerk, you'll do some digging for us as to what's needed?
Yes.
All right. Well then, anything else? All right, seeing nothing further, we will adjourn Committee of the Whole. Thank you, everybody.